So this is Jan Helfeld telling us why he's not an anarchist. So this guy has debated presidents. This guy has interviewed, but it's really a debate. He's debated several anarcho-capitalists. Molyneux, I think he debated Larkin briefly. It was kind of a dumpster fire. All of these debates with him are dumpster fires because he tries to lock into this consequentialist dichotomy with flagpole scenarios. But anyway, so this will be interesting. This is him actually writing out why he's not an anarchist, because he's a mostly principled libertarian type. He just doesn't want to go all the way. He's more of a minarchist. Jan Helfeld, why I am not an anarchist. Here is the reasoning. So if you are an anarchist, please focus on the premises and tell me which ones you agree with and which not. General arguments. Number 1. First of all, I am not saying that all these negative consequences I ascribe to anarchism are only possible. I think they are probable. The probable consequences: increasing crime because there are individuals not protected by a defense agency that used to be protected by the state, i.e., more easy victims, incentivizing the acquisition of military hardware by criminal gangs to increase their pool of potential victims, something they do not do now because it makes no sense for them now, an arms race between criminal gangs and defense agencies, as well as foreign tyrants that would attempt to rob and extort the weakest of us. Those that could not deter their aggression, an increase in the possibility of civil war inside the United States because all conflicts between defensive agencies with armies have this potential outcome, something that is not true today, even under our mixed system. We have to break this down, as this is full of stuff. Okay. He thinks they're probable. Well, his predictions don't determine what is true or false. So what he thinks is possible or probable is immaterial to the discussion. That's his personal opinion. The probable consequences. Okay, let's go over these. He thinks crime will increase because there are individuals not protected by defense agencies that used to be protected by the state. So we just talked about this earlier in the show. That's interesting. He thinks that there are people that are not going to be protected by defense agencies. I mean, and I can't say that that's not going to happen. Certainly, especially like, what if people don't want to be protected? What if people want to protect themselves? Okay, well, that can happen. What if people are so far away from society that there is no defense agency out there to service them? That's possible too. It's going to be kind of out there, but okay, it's possible. But for everybody else, in any kind of reasonably populated society, I'm not going to talk through that whole thing again because we did that earlier in this exact video. Yeah, that's definitely something that there's a market demand for, and there's going to be entrepreneurs that are going to want to profit off that market demand. Again, refer back to earlier in the video if you weren't here for it. Okay, back to more probable consequences. Incentivizing the acquisition of military hardware by criminal gangs to increase their pool of potential victims. Something they don't do now because it makes no sense for them. He thinks that criminal gangs don't acquire military hardware now? I mean, this appears to fail on its face. Look at the entire country of Mexico. Like, their gangs are militarized. They'll steal a truck and kit it out with like a turret in the back and armor. They'll up armor trucks, and definitely buy military rifles and grenades and rocket launchers and helicopters and all sorts of stuff. Like, I'm surprised that he made this argument, because it's certainly false just by looking at Mexico, and is also false looking at the historical mafias that we had here in the country here before law enforcement sort of won that civil war, let's say, between them. An arms race between criminal gangs and defense agencies. Well, we have that now too. I mean, you have that in Mexico between The Mexico gangs in the U.S. You have, and between the Mexico gangs and the politicians in Mexico, you have arms races between the gangs called countries, between the U.S. and other country gangs. The U.S. gang and the Iraq gang, or the Cold War. Remember that? That was kind of an arms race between gangs, except the gangs were just called fancier words like government. So yeah, I don't think that one stands. I mean, we have that now. And so I guess what I'm saying by we have that now is you can't say that something that exists now with states' existence, and even a maximal state. So if he's arguing that some state is needed to prevent this from happening, and we don't just have a small state, we have a massive state. So if states functioned to prevent arms races between gangs, then we would have none of that anywhere because we have such a huge state. But we have a lot of that in a lot of places and even between governments. So governments clearly do not function in that capacity. So hopefully I've kind of made that point. As well as foreign tyrants that would attempt to rob and extort the weakest of us. I don't mark an ethical principled difference between foreign tyrants and local tyrants. We've got tyrants right here that do not only just attempt, but succeed in robbing and extorting the weak of us. Namely, all of us are weak in comparison to well, I mean, if you collectivize all of us, then we're way more powerful. But as individuals, we are definitely weak in comparison to their squads of police and military. So that's happening now, locally. What difference does it make if the tyrant leading that extortion is across an ocean or across an arbitrary national borderline? We have that now. We're not protected now. So they will rob and extort the weakest of us, i.e. those that could not deter their aggression, an increase in the possibility of civil war inside United States, because all conflicts between defensive agencies with armies have this potential outcome, something that is not true today, even under our mixed system. Couple things. Increases, so that all conflicts between defense agencies with armies have this potential outcome. Is that a true statement? Yeah, of course. You can have a defensive agency go rogue and mobilize as an army against another defensive agency's army. The difference is that in a free society, if there would be all sorts of checks and balances that you would want put in place before you gave your money to a defensive agency. You would want, before you signed up for a defense agency, to give them your money, which you know, because literally everyone that we talk to about a free society and collective defense in a state with no state, in a state with no government providing it, every single person I talk to about this brings up this point. They are worried that these defense agencies that we're talking about competing will turn into warlord gangs, like micro-militaries. Everybody has this fear. What does that tell you? It means that in a free society, everyone will have that fear. What does that mean for the market? It means every entrepreneur is going to be competing to think of ways to make you feel better about that fear. They're going to be competing to come up with ways to make you feel more assured that if you sign up with their company, they will not be able to mobilize a military in that way. Unlike now, where you have micro-militaries and inactive, micro civil wars with one another. An example, I saw, I watch Cop Watcher videos. Cop Block Hot Springs does some of them. And there was one I saw. I don't remember whose video it was, and I can't tell you. I just can't think of it. But it was a situation in which a sheriff had gone bad, done something bad. And so another law enforcement agency showed up to this agency's office to serve a search warrant to confiscate some phones or something. And so you had law enforcement agencies in a standoff with each other, like hands on guns in certain points. So this is certainly possible now. And if it's possible now with a maximal government, I don't think it's a counter argument I don't think it's a pro-government argument. Because you already have the thing that you're saying might exist in a free society. Except in a free society, there could be checks and balances, which are outlawed now. If you tried to set up a competing police agency with checks that you could sell to people to prevent yourself from becoming a mobilized military force, if you tried to set up a competing police force with use of force restrictions in some way, who knows? It could be like a $100 million bond, and you had to submit to weekly inspections to make sure you weren't amassing military hardware. And, if one of your agents hurt somebody in a non-justified way, you lose a $100 million bond or something. And that bond gets paid to the victims and all of your customers, and your, contractually obligated, the shares of your company get sold off and you go out of business. Like, I'm just brainstorming, but you could have these structures in place, and the customers would demand that those structures were in place to prevent what he's talking about from happening. Unlike now, where you are forcibly prevented from creating competitors that have anything like that in place. They will attack you if you attempt to compete with your local police department. They will, and that's right. Like, if you try and compete with the FBI, see what happens. That's not allowed now. So it is true currently today under our mixed system, and it's impossible to have checks and balances. In a free society, you could. Okay, let's continue. I have explained, I hope you guys are enjoying this. If you are, like, thumbs up or something. I have explained the premises that lead me to these conclusions. I would like to know which ones you dispute. All of them. David said that the defense agencies would normally not fight, implying sometimes they would. This is a screenshot of a Facebook debate. The biggest waste of time ever. Don't do that. Don't Facebook debate. Ever, please. Save your lifespan. Get on the phone with people. That works way better. David said that the defense agencies would normally not fight, implying sometimes they would. If two defense agencies fight, that is a mini war here in the United States. Some of these wars will draw in other defense agencies, increasing the scope of the war and have collateral damage that would make life miserable in your city. You don't need too many of them. You don't need too many of them for things to be horrible. So the worst possible way for let me say it like that. The most expensive way for a dispute resolution company to resolve a dispute would be war. Number one, they would instantly lose a lot of their customers, instantly lose a lot of their income, instantly causing the board of directors of that company to freak out and put a stop to whatever was causing their customers to run away from their company. These are checks and balances that don't exist with police today. This stuff doesn't exist. If a cop does something bad, they get a short vacation, and if they're lucky, they get extended leave, or they get allowed to quit and a pension for the rest of their life. Like, the only victim when a cop gets caught doing something bad ever is the people that are extorted to pay for the court awards to the people that the cop harmed. The cop hurt somebody, and the person that the cop hurt takes him to court and wins, which is exceedingly rare because the justice system is in league with the cops. If they do win and they get a big payout, does that payout come from the cops? No, it comes from the tax victims. So there's never a downside. In a free society defense agency, there would be all the downsides. There would be PR disasters. There would be bonds and financial structures set up. Anyway, you get the idea. Just a board of directors alone that is responsible for share price and profitability predictions on the market would put a stop to most police abuse. That right there, that mechanism of the free market on its own stops police abuse. Just having a board that's accountable to shareholders. The premises for my conclusion that there would be an increase in criminality are: there will always be people that choose predation. Agreed. They prefer to pick on the weakest links, victims. There are individuals not protected by a defense agency that used to be protected by the state, i.e., more easy victims. Criminals do prefer to pick on the weakest victims. True. There would be, I'm changing it slightly from there are individuals, there would be individuals not protected by a defense agency that used to be protected by the state. I also think that's plausible, but I don't think they used to be protected by the state. The cops do not protect me. Only in the rare outlying circumstances do cops protect me. They usually clean up the mess after it's over. And even then, not even really effectively. Like, if Kaysen, my producer, had something stolen, and the cops took a report, and this was a multi-$1,000 equipment or whatever. The cops took a report. He knew where his stuff was. He knew who had it. Told the cops. Did they go and get it? Did they protect him? No, he had to go do it. It's a facade, and the facade of protection is worse than no protection. Because if you know you're not protected, you will take steps to protect yourself. If you think you are protected, then you might not take as many steps to protect yourself, leaving you more vulnerable than you would have been if you knew you weren't protected. So, there are individuals not protected by defense agencies that used to be protected by the state. Is it conceivable that there would be a person currently getting socialized protection by the state that in a free society, for some reason, might be left unprotected in a situation that they might have been protected by the state's police? I'm sure we could come up with that edge case. It would be like, I don't know that we could come up with that edge case in a good like an associative, like a good analogy, like a one-to-one. I don't think you could. I'm having trouble coming up with an apples to apples comparison there, because it would be like, okay, in the state we have a guy getting mugged and a cop standing by. And the cop actually does his job instead of radioing for backup and waiting, or running away, or attacking the victim, or shooting the dog and then the victim accidentally. You know, like, instead of doing all those stupid things that cops do every day, the cop actually does something and helps. Let's just say, because that can happen, right? It happens. To do an apples to apples, you have to look at that on the free society. Okay, you got a free society, guy getting mugged. You have a defense person there. And this goes to what I was saying earlier. Like, if you got your guy on the pad saying, oh, he's not my customer, I'm just going to watch this happen. That company's not going to be in business long. Not going to be in business long. Also, this assumes that all individuals, every single one, has the right to enslave everyone around them into paying for their protection. That right does not exist. I do not have a right to socialized protection. I do not have a right to make sure that you are extorted to pay for my protection. So, is it possible that there might be an individual left unprotected that would have been protected under socialism? I think it's possible. But it doesn't matter, because that doesn't justify extorting people around you to pay for your protection. That's my response to that. Thus, more crime. Premises for the conclusion that criminal gangs would be incentivized to buy military hardware. kind of already talked about that. With a central government, there is no incentive for criminal gangs to acquire tanks, guided missiles, or drones. Disproven by Mexico. We already talked about it. Because that just makes it easier for them to be caught, and they do not increase their pool of victims. Again, I'm pretty sure that's disproven by the mafias in Mexico. However, once the state is removed, every investment in military hardware increases the amount of potential victims. Same with the state. Like, these aren't distinctions between the state and this is something that exists now. David thinks that this investment would be unwise on their part. How does he know? Does he know cost-benefit analysis of criminality? On the face of it, a small investment in guided missiles would increase the potential for extortion enormously. More and more people would just have to give in to the demand of extortion. The proportional increase in defense is what maybe he doesn't see. If a company invests in a guided missile that could blow up, let's say, 1,000 people in a area, as opposed to, a squad of men that could maybe mow down 100 people, they've increased their potential victim count, true, but in so doing, they've increased the number of individuals that have a concerted reason to pool resources to resist them. Something that is disallowed in current society. Again, if you get together with your neighbors to go fight a criminal gang that is extorting you, for example, government, cops, etc., if you organize with people to defend yourself, you will be treated like a militia and wacoed. You are not allowed, on pain of death, to group together to defend yourself. Not only that, but the free market is denied its innovation to provide one-off, collective, arbitrary, customized, tailor-made, velvet rope collective defense. So if you do something that increases your threat pool, then you've also increased the number of people that might donate $100 to a GoFundMe to have you assassinated. Oh, wait, we can't have assassination GoFundMes now? Oh, why not? Oh, because the big gang in town doesn't want you to have assassination GoFundMes because you might come after them. Oh, okay. So that's just one example. 1,000 people, $100 each. I don't think there's many people on the face of the planet that would be safe from a bounty that size. Just for one example. Not only that, but you're going to have a market demand for defense against threats exactly like that. You're going to have companies that specialize in defending the little 1,000 person communities that get these random weird warlord rogue whatevers. You're going to have companies that specialize in tactically handling those situations. You can't have that today. And you have a central government with an incentive to acquire tanks, guided missiles, drones, because it makes them easier to, it's a force multiplier. Going a little bit slower than I thought, but I think this is good chat, so I'm going to keep going. Military hardware. Central government, there's no incentive for criminal gangs to acquire tanks, guided missiles, drones, because that just makes it easier for them to be caught, and they do not increase their pools of victims. However, once the state is removed, every investment in military hardware increases the amount of potential victims. David thinks this investment would be unwise on their part. How does he know? Does he know the cost-benefit of criminality? On the face of it, I'm catching up now, I apologize. A small investment in guided missiles would increase the potential for extortion enormously. And I just talked about why the inverse would also be true, and the inverse would be unfettered in a free society. So there would be a wild free market, capitalistic, beautiful thing, a bunch of the smartest minds in business trying to solve that problem. Unlike now. More and more people would just have to give in to the demand of extortion. That, I think, is a non sequitur. I don't think that follows, for the reasons I mentioned. The same logic applies to foreign tyrants and criminals. And I would say it also applies to local tyrants and criminals. David's answer is he would depend on charity to pay for a professional army that could deter these threats of extortion. I think I've provided a much better explanation and options. I think this is imprudent, and I would never rely on charity to protect my freedom and all my property. Of course you think that. And not only do you think that, but most people would think that. What does that do? It creates something in a market. Demand. If a lot of people want something, it creates a demand. What is the market? What is capitalism and free markets really? What is its superpower? Satisfying demand. Unlike government. It is too flimsy a reed on which to support your whole life. Yeah, demand. I think your chances protecting your liberty and property are greater by socially organizing with people that are willing to pay for such an important service and commit to this legally in the form of a limited government. What you think people should do is something that you can keep to yourself. You don't get to say, well, I think that everyone should be extorted to pay for the services that I think. You're just a normal statist. You're just like all the other things that people... I think you should be extorted to pay for abortions. I think you should be extorted to pay for food and medicine and blah, 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 roads. The list is endless. This is opinions are like assholes. Your opinion should not affect me. Neither should your asshole. Oh, no. That feels like a quote just happened. Damn it. Oh, Jesus. Anyway, he's stating his preference. He's stating what he thinks. He thinks the outcome of not extorting everyone around him to pay for the service that he thinks is important will result in worse outcomes. Therefore, he's justified in extorting everyone around him. Sorry, no. You can speak for yourself and only yourself. Full stop. In the debate, each of us has a right to define what we consider optimal social organization. David argued that no government was the optimum. I argued that limited government was the optimum. And at the end of the day, the only one that you have a right to control with that opinion is you. So you can argue that limited government is the optimum all you want. Argue away. But I'm not part of that we, and none of your opinions should apply to me rightfully. ANCAP Gamer says, question, my brother posed this question to me. In a free market, what's to stop a person from strong-arming every small business in town? Or what's to stop a larger business from buying out all small businesses? Okay, two separate questions. So the first one is, what's to stop a person from strong-arming every small business in town? Every small business the person strong arms will have a vested interest in paying for a security service to protect them, or for, a GoFundMe to have the problem individual removed, so to speak. There's all sorts of, when you unleash free market innovation on a problem like that, man, it's like, I always use the example of slaves picking the cotton, right? So, like, we would have never imagined that in modern day, like back in the time of slavery, when we were talking about getting rid of the slaves, you would have never imagined that one day, once we get rid of the slaves, innovation, the free market would open up and would create these massive steel beasts that run on decomposed dinosaur bones, oil and gasoline to harvest the fields automatically. They just drive around the fields navigated by GPS, We would have never conceived of that, because that's the kind of innovation you get from free market. And so if you apply the innovation of the free market to a problem like a local asshole trying to strong arm businesses, man, just imagine let's just think. Okay, so every business owner that has is getting strong armed by this guy maybe puts a camera out front, and we run a central server AI that monitors the faces of the people that walk by your store, and so that allows you to keep a real-time location of wherever the strong man asshole is. And so when you see him start heading towards, to make his routes to the store, you have all the store owners just happen to be in that store at once. And when he walks in, oopsie, anyway, it's just, you can think of ideas, you can invent. If you get rid of the monopolized security service of the police that's incompetent and terrible all around and murderous, then all sorts of stuff opens up. Second part of your question was, or what's to stop a larger business from buying out all small businesses? What's to stop a larger business from buying out all small businesses? The only way in a free society a larger business could buy out all small businesses is if all the small businesses sold their companies to the larger business. So what's to stop them? Well, the small businesses choosing not to sell would stop them. And if they chose to sell, then, I mean, there's no issue here. They voluntarily sold their business. Were you gonna tell the big company it can't voluntarily contract with people to buy their businesses just because you don't want the big business? I mean, you don't get to control other people in that way. You don't get to decide. Like, you can decide for yourself if you're one of the small businesses. You can be like, no, I'm not selling. I'm going to stay here. Okay, free society. You can do that. It's not like the big business can force you to sell. Okay, let's continue. Each of us. Are you guys still enjoying this? This is running long, but I'm having fun, so I'm going to keep going because I'm the only house with power. I look outside and it's just black. None of the houses are on. Mwaha. Each of us has to live with the likely consequences of setting up that structure, including the possibilities of deviating from it to some degree. The deviations from limited government I criticize and try to change, but by and large I consider the American experiment a great success compared to any previously existing anarchist model. Providing a great life for me, most Americans, and I suspect for David as well. Contrary to anarchists, I don't consider it a failure because we have strayed from the model to some degree. These are all his opinions. I don't really debate opinions because they shouldn't rightfully affect me. The deviations from David's model, we didn't even get into our horrible, I think he's commenting on a debate maybe, probably another one where he got his ass kicked. He usually rage quits, it seems like. Our horrible Civil War was one such case of a deviation from the principles of limited government, which depend on the consent of the governed and the recognition that if there is a fundamental difference regarding social organization, there should be a procedure to secede peacefully, like I have suggested and offered the anarchists, and none of them seem to be interested in it. They appear to have no interest to move to an anarchist zone within the United States and then secede. This guy is only thinking of people in terms of collectives. Like, I am me. I already seceded. Check out the Declaration of Individual Independence on this channel. I am me. I'm my own. I am not part of any collective, and I'm going to stay right here because I own this property rightfully. And I'm not going to move and go live in some quarantine zone with other anarchists. No thanks. That's not my bag. I'm good here, thanks. Your brother is of the mindset that any small business would gladly take a large buyout regardless, hence the question. So if the massive company is giving away massive amounts of money, I guess what's the harm is what I'm saying. Like, if a massive company comes in and makes all of the small business owners rich in buying out their companies, what's the problem? Now you've got a bunch of entrepreneurs with a lot of money in their pocket to go create more businesses. Okay. If it's all voluntary, it's all voluntary. Cool. Okay. Now, one of the market functions that might come into play that might retard this process a little bit would be that, if all the small businesses in a town started getting bought up, it's not like they all exist in a bubble. They would talk to each other. Hey, Walmart's coming in, and they're just paying anything that we ask to buy our business. They're giving us huge buyouts. Fred sold his down the street for $100K. Then John sold his for $150K. And, there's only 7 of us left. So if they want to buy out all the companies, we need to start asking a little bit more. And so maybe the next guy gets $200K, and the next guy gets $2 million, and the next guy gets $2.5 million. And now you get down to like the last 2 companies in the city, and they're like, look, I want 10 million or I'm not selling. Eventually it's going to get more and more expensive for the large company to buy them out if word gets around that is the goal of the large company. The little guys are going to make it more and more expensive and more difficult on the big company to sell. Same thing would happen in like real estate. Like once word got around that they were trying to buy up all the houses on a street, the closer they got to owning all the houses, the more expensive those remaining houses would get. In some cases, up to a lot, enough to make it impossible for the company to monopolize those houses. Something to think about. Okay, let's continue. 2, I think we're going to get back to new arguments, hopefully. The more security agencies there are, the more probability there will be more conflicts, and one of the parties will resort to physical force to enforce their view of what's right. If there is no law of the land that applies to everyone, then on top of all disputes we now have, we will also have disputes about what the law should be on every issue: criminal law, civil law, criminal procedure, civil procedure, inheritance law, tort law, penalties, etc. This will also increase the amount of disputes and conflicts, regardless of whether many agencies refer conflicts to arbitration. It also increases the uncertainty of what the law is, which makes businesses and investment less likely. I don't want to read too much because there's a lot to respond to in here. There already now are tens of thousands of law enforcement agencies that are separate, and they have their own little fiefdoms, and their edges overlap, and there's conflicts all the time between the agencies. Why don't they fight each other now? I mean, they do sometimes. They certainly do. There's conflict. There's interagency, intercounty, interdepartmental, even in the same county, conflicts. Why don't they come to blows now? Because the people that they ostensibly work for would fire them, would petition the government, would pitchfork the local government if their agencies started having little mini wars with each other. That demand is going to still be there in a free society. You're not going to want to pay for a security agency that goes around making micro wars with other security agencies. The board of directors would freak out when you started losing business because you were trying to be a little emperor. I feel like we've already addressed this, so I will move on. It says it will increase the amount of disputes and conflicts. In a free society, disputes and conflicts would be the most expensive way to handle things, which would cause customers and investors to move away from companies with less efficient, less profitable business practices. I feel like I'm repeating myself, so I'm going to continue on. There's a whole structure of of how companies function, how they get investment, how they have oversight, how they have like a board of directors, how they get and lose money, how they predict what their profitability is going to be and then try and meet those profitability numbers. All sorts of structures that exist in companies that nothing like it exists in government agencies, security agencies. All sorts of checks and balances. It increases the uncertainty of what the law is, which makes business and investment less likely. Could there be more uncertainty of what the law is because there would not be one monolithic law? There would be people working together to, there would be probably dispute agencies, for example, working together to resolve disputes. So would it be profitable for a lot of the dispute resolution companies and defense agencies to have some baseline agreements on what should be the resolution to most conflicts? Like basically what I'm saying is like a common law system of justice that's existed for thousands of years. Certainly, it would be less profitable not to. It would be more costly to have to mitigate disputes with 1,000 different rule books than it would be to have, some kind of worked out common law or something that you could agree to. And there might be a couple different versions of the common law, and you could pick which one was most important, and they would compete with each other for market share, which would, unlike now, it would actually make the law compete. Sort of the law, like the law now doesn't compete with another version of U.S. law to see which one's better, to see which one gets continued to exist. Whereas in a free society, you could have, I wouldn't call it law, but you'd have the rules, and The rule sets would actually have to compete with each other to continue existing. How fantastic would that be? Great. You also have, competitors. Again, this a good example to go back to is the cell phone companies. Like you have mobile phone companies that are, cutthroat competitors of each other, and they work together all day long to make sure that their technology interoperates so that customers from one company can easily text, call, and talk to people on their competitors. I describe those hunter-gatherer societies of the first million years that had no government as anarchy because I view the lack of government as the essential characteristic for anarchism. The point was that there was very little progress during that period, nor was there much progress or great civilization in the Icelandic anarchist experiment or the Somali anarchist experiment. And this is like a consequentialist thing, like because past societies he deems anarchist didn't progress, we can't have anarchy now. Like, I don't care what your judgments of the historical societies are, it doesn't affect me. Like, I mean, you can make the argument, but you're just arguing your opinion. Okay, whatever. I don't want to debate your opinions. Compare that with the American limited government experiment. It is night and day. I explained why the government was instrumental in the increased progress. For example, irrigation, canals, general laws like the Roman law, and reduction of internal military conflicts, because there was a monopoly of major force in the government. Number 3, it is difficult to predict exactly what kind of defense agencies there would be under anarchy and how they would operate, and what plans they would offer to their customers. But it is probable that there will be a variety of plans and kinds of defense agencies, some of which would not refer all matters to arbitration. Some would be simply alliances of people that feel close and share values, even bad values, like white power groups, black power groups, Muslims that believe in Sharia law and want to apply it, pedophiles that want to protect each and form alliances, security agencies that advertise better judges and their outcomes in home judicial practice better than arbitration, criminal gangs that just want to protect each other and practice predation, etc. If they have sufficient military power, nobody will mess with them. Which ones will go broke and how long it would take them to go broke is difficult to predict, but David seems to think he knows. Kind of like repeating ourselves with the gang stuff. I've already kind of disproven all that. There would definitely be a variety of plans and kinds of defense agencies. That's a good thing, not a bad thing, because those defense agencies would have to compete. Unlike now, unlike in Minarchy, some of the defense agencies would not refer to matters of arbitration, simply alliances, bad values. Sure, you could have groups. You could have a town of people that think abortion is okay, for sure. People are going to disagree. They do now, and they fight over it in the current government. You literally extort people to pay for something that another group finds morally objectionable. That's some pretty evil stuff in and of itself. Pedophiles that want to protect each other and form a line. Yeah, you're gonna have bad people. That exists now. I mean, like, you have pedophile rings now. I saw an article where you could apparently they found out you could buy little girls for like $70 or something. It's insane. That exists now with government. And if maximal government doesn't end it, hell, if the people in the government are involved in it, then that's not an argument against anarchy. That's an argument against the way it is now, against government. Criminal gangs that just want to protect each other. Yeah, I've covered the criminal gang stuff. If they have sufficient military power, nobody will mess with them. Yeah, no, because the military power of governments exists only through extortion and inflation. And a free society wouldn't have extortion and inflation. Militaries are almost universally paid for through inflating currencies of the nation. That's one of the reasons why the United States got off the gold standard, was that they needed to have the ability to inflate the currency to pay for their military actions. So in a free society, people wouldn't use dumbass currencies like fiat, which is just a currency declared to be so through the point of a gun, right? Number 4, voters do not have to be ignorant of political issues or candidates, nor is it necessarily irrational for them to spend some time in making these decisions that affect their freedom, property, and every aspect of their life. In fact, it is quite rational to do so, and responsible citizens, within the context of their lives, should allocate some time to this value, not only to vote correctly, but to influence how other people vote and think, and thus affect the social organization in which they live, i.e. their society. One of the reasons we do the correct thing is to serve as an example to others, and thus influence their actions as well. This is one such case when assuming some social responsibility helps improve your chances of having your individual rights respected. These are all just his opinions. I don't know why this is number 4. This is just him telling us how he thinks society should work and what you should do to participate in it. This is not an argument. It is not just the issues and candidates, it's also the principles. I spent time discussing political issues, including whether anarchism is the optimal system to affect the outcome. If I didn't think I could affect the outcome, I would not do it. I act with purpose. Some of these purposes are indirect, like I mentioned above. So number 4 was a nothing burger. He was just telling us why he's typing so fervently. All right, guys. Woo, I've been talking a long time. A long time. It is 2 a.m. Holy crap. Guys. I knew this is, I told you, turn the expectations down in the beginning. I hope I exceeded them anyway. I have enjoyed rambling on 100 different topics for 3 hours. As usual, this stream will be privated the moment it ends. So if you missed the beginning or whatever, you can watch the entire thing, the full stream in its entirety with nothing cut out by becoming a supporter, disenthrall.me/support. Please do. It's cool. It helps. It motivates me. Supporters get front of the line when they have questions or things that they want me to talk about or make content on. So definitely do that. I like if we're giving you value and you return the favor, then we will work together to create cool content.